DRY stands for don't repeat yourself. So if you find yourself writing the same lines of code over and over and over again with just minor changes, maybe different values for variables and things like that, you probably need to do something to refactor your code. When you refactor your code, you're basically making your code more modular and getting rid of a lot of those instances where you're repeating yourself. And one of the best ways to do this is by using functions. Now, a function in JavaScript is a special kind of JavaScript object that basically just contains a whole bunch of code to be run and assigns it to a variable name. So we're going to create a function. If I created a function, the function sayName, every function starts with this function keyword, and then you give it a name. And this is what you'll call later on when you want to use the function. Then, after the name of the function, you put a set of parentheses. And inside the set of parentheses go the parameters of the function. In this case, I'm just going to pass a string. We're going to call that string name into my function. Now notice I don't have to specify the type of the parameter. I just basically give it a parameter variable name, and I can then use it inside my function. So now I've got a function set up. I use the keyword function. I give my function a name, and then I tell it what parameters to pass in. And then the code for my function goes inside these curly brackets. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to console.log that variable name. Now, if I run this, it's not going to do anything because I haven't called the function yet. In order to call the function, you use the function's name, so in this case, sayName, and then you pass a value in for the parameter. So in this case, I'm going to pass the value Brian. Okay. Now, when I run, it's going to log to the console Brian, because what it's doing is it's logging the value of this variable name. Now that's kind of boring. So what I'm going to do here is add hello to this name. We're just going to do a little string addition here. Remember that if name is a string, you can add it to another string with the concatenate operator. And when I press run here, it says hello Brian. And then I can say name using whatever string I want. Hello world, hello AVLI, right? And when I run this, I'll get 3 different console log statements because I'll be running this whole function each time I call it using just this one line with this string parameter. Okay, so this is kind of a trivial example because if you wanted to log out hello plus a string, you can do that in fewer lines than it took to write this sayName function. But this is just to give you an idea of how functions work. Let's look at a real-world example, a function that will actually be useful for you in your coding. So I've got a function here to print out the reverse of the string that's passed into it. So I've called my function reverse. I've passed in str as a parameter. And then within this function, I do a whole bunch of things with this string. First, I set up a variable within this function that's an empty string. And then I use a for loop. And I loop through the string, starting with the index of the last letter of the string. That's string.length -1, because remember that all strings are just like arrays. You can grab a letter using an index value, and it starts from 0 being the first letter of the string all the way to the length of the string -1, because the length gives you the total number of letters, so length -1 gives you the index of the last letter because we start with 0 when we're indexing our letters. Okay, so var I equals string length -1, I is greater than or equal to 0, I minus minus. So this will start at the end of my string, and it'll basically give me the I value, the index value of the letter at the end of the string, and then move back through the string until I get to index 0. And then with each of those, I'm going to add to my empty string rev str in square brackets the index number. And what that'll do is that will take the letter that's at that index and it will add it to rev. And at the end, I'm going to log out rev, and if all goes well, it'll log out the string that I put into the function in reverse. So let's try it. So I call this by using reverse and then passing through a string. Welcome to game development. And then I press run, and you notice down here in my console it's logged out the string reversed. And I can do that with any string that I want to put in here. So a little bit of Lewis Carroll here. Was brillig in the slithy toves, did gyre and gimble in the wave. So you can see how this would be useful, because now we have this function reverse that we can use whenever we need a function that's going to reverse a string. And we can just keep this in a list of handy-dandy string functions that we can call on when we need it. And I don't need to really even understand how this function works. Once the function is written and working, all I need to know is the name of the function and then what I have to pass into it in order to call it. So a couple of other things with functions. This kind of function where it just runs a chunk of code is a kind of function that you'll use relatively often. But sometimes we want our functions to return a value. And so what if instead of logging out rev to the console, I use the return keyword and I return rev. Now, I'm going to show you something here. If I try to log rev, I'm going to get a keyword. I'm going to get a reference error that says that I can't find the variable rev. And the reason is that the variable rev is declared inside this function. Okay? So I haven't actually assigned the contents of this variable to anything yet. The variable rev is not available to me. So instead what I need to do is I have to declare a new variable. I'm just going to declare it as x. And then I'm going to reverse, I'm going to use my reverse function, and I'm going to put a string in here. Okay? Now, if I log x, it will log the reverse of this string hello world. And then I can use this x later on. So if I wanted to log x plus, let's do a mirror image. Let's do the reverse and then the forward. If I log that, I end up getting a mirror image. I'm actually able to use this variable and add it to other strings later on. I could even pass this string into another function. So you can see how this would be useful, right, to modularize your code. Okay, so the other thing about these functions is that a function can contain as many parameters as you want to give it. Usually if you're putting in more than about 4 or 5 parameters, there's probably a simpler way to do it, but I just wanted to demo that for you. And so I'm going to show you another function. This is another string function that I wrote. And this is a function